Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. The crypto market's down a little bit at the time that I'm recording this, but this is still a great day for crypto. And frankly, volatility, the likes of which we're seeing at this moment, very normal for a day like this. It's an FOMC day, and the Fed did not disappoint. This is actually what the crowd was expecting. We did get a rate cut. I'm going to talk about that and why it's actually good, despite what some bears would have you believe. Also, I'm going to share with you perspective from 8 different XRP chart analysts, including one who says that it's going to cost more than $14 for one individual XRP, and he is predicting that it's happening this market cycle. We are not done so far as he's concerned. But before going further, I do want to be clear. I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice. And you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. As I record this video, it is 4:22 p.m. Central Time, Wednesday, December 10th, 2025. XRP is down to $2.03. Bitcoin hovering just above $92,000. And we got the typical volatility that you'd expect, whether you look at the XRP chart or the Bitcoin chart. Here you can see as the news is breaking up and well, I'm going to say up a lot and then down a lot. Now that's relative on this chart. I'm saying a lot on this chart and then right back down. In the scheme of things, the percentage change wasn't wild, but I'm just noting that, yes, of course, on an FOMC day, when Jerome Powell starts flapping his gums and syllables start falling out of his silly little face hole, yeah, things happen in the market, and that's what we got right here. Headline here says, well, a couple key parts of this anyway. Here it is from CNBC. Divided Fed approves third rate cut this year, sees slower pace ahead. A Federal Reserve split over where its priorities should lie, cut its key interest rate Wednesday, but signaled a tougher road ahead for further reductions. Fulfilling expectations of a hawkish cut, the central bank's Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC, lowered its key overnight borrowing rate by a quarter percentage point, putting it in a range between 3.5 to 3.75%. However, the move carried caution flags about where policy is headed from here and featured no votes from 3 members, which hasn't happened since 2019. And of course, that's 3 no votes out of 12, so still went through here. So yes, the Fed cut rates for the 3rd time in 2025, and it is still possible that we can see rate cuts in 2026. In fact, Jerome Powell is going to be out the door, close to halfway through the year anyway. Somebody's going to replace him for reasons I don't feel like getting into in this particular video. It's too far outside the scope of this video. There's reason to believe that it's going to be somebody who is going to be likely to cut rates further. Let's just say that. And of course, yes, it's a vote, but sway is a real thing. But look, the market overall, if you're looking at equities, the market's loving this. Because when the Federal Reserve cuts rates, it usually means one thing for risk assets: more liquidity. Cheaper borrowing and a softer dollar tend to push capital out of safe havens and into risk-on assets, like crypto, by the way. So don't focus on the short term. I know the crypto market's down. This is normal on FOMC day. But I'm just saying, like, that shift, it really does historically benefit crypto because investors become more comfortable reaching for upside. And for XRP specifically, this environment can be even more powerful. Institutions that are already allocating through new XRP ETFs respond mechanically to macro signals. And when liquidity conditions improve, which is obviously happening right now, and QT obviously into December 1st, those models expand their crypto sleeves. They expand them, and XRP gets pulled higher right along with the broader market. Lower rates increase risk appetite, and in a cycle where utilities and payment-focused assets are gaining attention, frankly, XRP stands to benefit meaningfully from that very obvious renewed flow of capital. Because this is actually what's happening, and this is why rate cuts matter. They change the liquidity backdrop, and liquidity is the fuel that drives every major crypto move. And historically, and I got to say it, historically, rate cuts do tend to correlate with a market that is about to fall off a cliff. So if you're thinking of any chart analysts you follow who are bearish and they warn that actually usually rate cuts are bad, they're not wrong. They're telling you true information, but what's the rest of the story? I mean, it's true, but that doesn't automatically mean a bear market is coming. In many past cycles, markets fell because the economy was already breaking. That is true. and the Federal Reserve was forced to react late. So, of course, the cut didn't cause the sell-off. The cut was a response to a bad economic situation. And so some in crypto point to that history and assume this cut is bearish. But that ignores the current macro backdrop. That's the problem. That's a problem for them anyway. Outside of some labor softening, we are not seeing the kind of broad economic stress that usually precedes a true bear market. We're just not seeing it. This looks far more like preventive easing than some sort of emergency response. To me, that seems very obvious. So just because there's been this correlation where cuts have usually correlated with bearish outlooks, which again I do not deny, many times that's not the case. And so if you go to the situations, dive deeper than that. If you go to the situations where there have been cuts and they've not been some harbinger of doom, why is that? It's because they're environments that are similar to the one that we're in right now. Liquidity is it's heading up, not down. This isn't a response to something completely horrific happening. So no, the bears that are just look, any bear that is saying, guys, hey, usually when the rate cuts happen, that's a bad signal. That is a ridiculously unfair simplification of what that actually signals. That's way too simplified. Here's a post before Jerome Powell started flapping his gums. This is at 1:09 p.m. Central. This is from Crypto Wizard. And here he's showing the Russell 2000 small cap stocks. And he said, is this the key? Something is brewing. Back in 2020, only when the Russell 2000 broke out to new highs did altcoins explode higher. Russell 2000 is on the verge of a major run if Powell doesn't spoil the fun. We'll find out soon. Yeah, well, Powell did not spoil the fun, actually. And it's true, because look, this is a signal that matters. As it becomes clear that liquidity conditions are becoming more favorable and there's less of an incentive to hold U.S. treasuries, where do you think the funds flow? Well, they're more likely to flow into risk on assets. Historically, that's always the case, and that's the environment that we find ourselves in right now. That means stocks and crypto. And the more liquidity there is, the greater the appetite for risk on asset, broadly speaking anyway. And so that's why investors move out the risk curve. And so instead of investing just in large cap stocks, they'll invest in the mid caps and, yes, the small caps, the Russell 2000. And what coincides with that, if you zoom out on a chart enough? Crypto also, because crypto, talk about a risk on asset, doesn't get riskier than that. So if people have more dollars they're willing to allocate to risky assets, yes, it comes to crypto. Okay, it does. So forget the short-term noise for today, and at least at the time I'm recording this, market's down a little bit. Maybe it's up by the time you're watching this. Either way, that short-term noise doesn't matter. Number ultimately go up. And here's somebody who gets it. This is chart analyst, the great Matsby. He shared this post at 2:28 p.m. today. That's Central Time, of course. And he's highlighting the IWM, which is an ETF that tracks the Russell 2000. So that means that the chart's effectively the same as the Russell 2000 chart, which, so the IWM is what's on your screen here. It's the same as Russell 2000, chart-wise. And so he says, the IWM monthly candle is setting up to be a monster and is nicely into all-time high territory. Recessions don't begin with small caps breaking out. The new bull market has just begun with this breakout, and fib extensions above are coming. Now, folks, have you noticed, if you've been watching my videos over the last 4 or 5 days, whatever it's been, where I've been talking about markets like I am in this one, I've noted that there have been a number of analysts saying the Russell 2000 is breaking out. And wouldn't you know it, today we got a new intraday all-time high of, actually it was 2,576. The highest it marks on the chart is 2,574 at 3:35 p.m. Central Time. And it closed at a new all-time high also, 2,559. So we get this news and the Russell 2000 breaks out. And I know crypto's down right now, but that's just short-term noise. You're going to have individual days where stocks are up, crypto's down, and sometimes the inverse of that. It doesn't matter. What I'm saying is, under the right conditions, you zoom out on a chart, you can see that there is a very real correlation. So check back in with me a year from now. I have a very strong suspicion that we're going to be happy with what comes over the next 12 months. I have a very strong suspicion that is indeed the case. Here's a post from Hunter Horsley. Hunter Horsley is the CEO of Bitwise, and they, of course, are one of the firms that recently launched a spot XRP ETF, so I'm a fan. And I think that Hunter says a lot of intelligent things, and he's certainly well-informed, and I agree with a lot of what he says, and I agree with part of the post that's on your screen here, but there's one thing I got to nitpick a bit about here, where I just respectfully disagree. But this morning he wrote, 4-year cycle is dead. The market has changed, matured. We will look back on 2025 and realize that it's been a bear market since February, masked by the relentless bid from digital asset treasuries and Bitcoin treasury companies. Everything is lining up for a massive 2026. It's stunning. Okay. Well, I agree with him that the 4-year cycle is dead, so that's easy to agree with. But I disagree with the idea that we've been in a bear market since February this year. You know, Bitcoin literally hit a new all-time high of roughly $126,000 just 2 months ago. So that makes no sense, in my humble opinion. And if Raoul Pal's thesis for a 5-year market cycle plays out, and we see the market entering true euphoria in mid to late 2026, expect to see more posts like this from various chart analysts who are bearish. I'm not saying he's bearish, but expect to see that from analysts who are bearish today. And they won't admit that they were wrong. They will not do it. And I'm not saying that about Hunter. I'm just saying it just got the juices flowing. I'm just saying, it just gets me thinking. The analysts who are saying we're in a bear market today will not admit they're wrong when the market surges higher in 2026. They'll just claim they were right all along, and that what we're going through right now in 2025, it's a bear market. It's just more shallow than we're used to. Just more shallow. Just a little different there. They'll say that the market has changed, rather than admit that liquidity is the backbone of macro. They won't do it. They won't admit that. And they'll say all the charts. Look, all the charts are downstream from macro. So just mark my words on this. They're going to be screaming that, and it just won't make any damn sense. Macro leads us, which is it's not going to be a fluke. If Raoul Pal's right and he called this over a year ago, that's not a fluke, folks. It's because liquidity is king, and you can see what's going to happen. In terms of probability, based on debt recycling or debt refinancing rather. So I just don't buy the narrative. I'm just my humble opinion. You guys believe whatever you believe. Here's a post from on-chain analytics firm Swissblock. The risk oscillator is flashing the same pattern seen before prior Bitcoin bottoms. Risk peaks, volatility spike, early easing. But it's not confirmation yet. Until risk stabilizes and flows improve, we remain in a high-risk volatility-driven environment where every move is tactical. So that's a fancy way of saying, there's signals that we might have bottomed, but we're not sure yet. That's basically it, which I say is fair enough. But don't be surprised if we look back and we're like, this either is the bottom or very close to it. The cycle, it just flatly is not over. It doesn't make logical sense to believe that this is over. And for the people that are saying we're in a bear market, and just wait, because like I said, they're not going to admit they're wrong. I got to ask, to those bears, I would have to ask them, what is your definition of bear market? And they will tailor their definition to whatever supports what they're saying so that they don't have to admit that they were wrong. That's what's going to happen. Now, if I'm wrong, I'll just own it. I don't have an ego, so it's like it's not fun to be wrong. Like I won't enjoy it, but I mean, like it's not that big a deal. I'll just say I'm wrong if I'm wrong. But I have a suspicion of what's coming here. Here's a post from Altcoin Vector, on-chain analytics firm run by the same folks that run Swissblock. Ethereum has inherent strength and is now leading the market. But the timing is unusual. Ethereum typically leads after Bitcoin pumps, passing the baton to alts. ETH usually surges when Bitcoin is flat or consolidating. Now, with Bitcoin lacking clear direction, Ethereum has stepped into the leadership role. Okay, well, we'll see if it takes off right now. I did just want to highlight that briefly because when this thing takes off, historically, that signals start of alt season anyway. I don't know if that means it's going to happen very, very soon, but that is indeed the case. And also because I've seen a ton of analysts that I follow talking about Ethereum. I just don't spend a ton of time on my channel highlighting them. I will from time to time, but I've seen a lot of it. I've seen tons of analysts coming to basically the same or similar conclusions that Ethereum is looking pretty damn primed, which I hope is the case because I want the whole asset class to do well. Here's a post from chart analyst Mustache. Altcoins 2018 through 2021 versus altcoins 2022 through 2026. People think it's over, but it hasn't even started. And of course, he's showing the total 2 chart, which is top 125 coins by market cap, excluding Bitcoin. So just altcoins. And what he's pointing out here, obviously, is that structurally, what's happening right now, this market cycle is the same as what happened last cycle. And so if you're pushing into 2026, obviously you can argue the timing is different, but the factors that are causing the time to be different are not different. Those factors are the same as they've ever been. And liquidity is absolutely at the core of this. It is the backbone of all of this. So Seeing the market peak mid 2026 or at some point in 2026, whether it's sooner or later than that, wouldn't be crazy. In fact, that's why Raoul Paul and Julian Biddle and Tech Dev and Tom Lee, they all say that's likely, in fact. And I'm on that camp. Like, to me, that's what makes logical sense. I haven't seen a better macro thesis than that for crypto. I just haven't. If somebody's got one, then show it to me. But all of the bears that keep showing their charts and saying, "See, look, this is the metric that only happened in a bear market," I'm like, "Oh, okay, great. So what's your macro thesis?" Crickets, absolute crickets. Well, I don't have that. I mean, I'm a chart guy. Okay. Well, then how am I going to take that? Because sometimes when history rhymes with itself, there are individual metrics that don't perfectly rhyme. Like that. That's why. Actually, that what I mean to say is they don't perfectly repeat. Which is why I say history rhymes with itself. Of course, individual metrics aren't exactly 100% going to be the same from cycle to cycle. There are tiny things that are a little bit different. But when people say this time is different, they mean from a fundamental perspective. And what I'm saying is no, from a fundamental perspective, nothing's different. The same drivers of global liquidity are still in place. Nothing is different, folks. Not if that's what you mean by this time is different. Let's talk about some XRP for the rest of the video. How about that? Here's a post from chart analyst Javon Marks. He says more than $14 for one XRP. When XRP outran Bitcoin by over 240%, prices of XRP rose by over 570%. With XRP looking set to outrun Bitcoin by over 600% this time around, we could see prices climb by at least that amount, resulting in a price point of more than $14 for one XRP. Okay, now you know that I don't make price predictions, so I don't pretend to know if that's right or wrong. I know it ain't crazy. The idea of XRP getting to double-digit price action this cycle, definitely not crazy. And I do believe that at some unknown point in the future, XRP will have a new all-time high against Bitcoin, which we have not had since the first half of 2017. Yes, we've had an all-time high for XRP against the United States dollar, but not against Bitcoin. What do you think happens when that occurs? This is why I keep saying the analysts that are calling for, $10, $15, $20 XRP, whatever it is, I don't think any of that's crazy. I don't know if we'll hit it. I'm telling you flatly, I don't know. But it is safely supplanted within the confines of reality to have such speculation. It really is. It truly is. It is not crazy to think that at least might happen. If this market's going to truly go ballistic and XRP is going to get a certain percentage dominance, even if just for a short period, even if it goes from 4 to 5% up to what if it does go to 15%? And what if the market cap for the asset class is way higher? What are you going to get from here? 6, 8, 10-fold increase from here? I mean, possibly. It's just not crazy. And the idea that XRP had an all-time high against Bitcoin in 2017 and that was it for the rest of history, I think that's an absurd proposition. Of course, XRP at some point in history is going to hit a new all-time high against Bitcoin. And then you think about what that means in terms of United States dollars. And yeah, that's where it's like, okay, now it's like we won the lottery. In terms of what that means for on an individual level for people. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're here for. That's what we've been waiting for. To think that's not going to happen makes no damn sense to me. Because XRP is a clear and obvious winner of the crypto space. ChartNerd reposted this, and he simply wrote XRP higher with a little rocket emoji, so he's fully on board with this. And he also separately shared this post just this morning. He said, XRP, whatever the short-term path/scenario, the macro picture will drive this beast to the stratosphere. And so what he's highlighting here, he's been talking about this a lot recently, it's just the fact that basically for most of the last year, although XRP, yes, has hit a few new all-time highs, which is really fun to see, mostly just been in an accumulation range. That's it. That's all that happens here. And he believes there's going to be a final markup, a final burst to the upside, and historically, that is what happens, actually. And if we're going to have liquidity continue to increase and Bitcoin is going to go for a final parabolic run and we are going to have an alt season, that means XRP is going to participate. And so we're betting on that from a macro perspective. If we're right on the macro bet, XRP goes. If we're wrong on the macro bet and the bears are right, XRP is going to be hibernating for an untold number of years, several years perhaps. I do not find that to be remotely probable. And I admit, of course I don't know for sure. Nobody does. But all I can do is my best. And that means being intellectually honest. And this is what I think makes sense. I'm a human. I could be wrong, but this is it. And if I'm wrong, I'll own it. But I really believe this. I think this is what makes sense. Here's a post from chart analyst Ether Nacional. He said XRP in accumulation area, so he's highlighting the same thing. It's what I've been talking about since for the years leading up to 2024 in November when XRP broke out a little over a year ago. For years leading up to that, I was highlighting this exact pattern. You don't have to be a chart guy to understand. I'm not a chart guy. I don't want to be one because it sounds boring to me and it wouldn't change my investment strategy. So I just don't want to do that. But it's you get a major surge in a market cycle, then you move sideways, and then you get the second and final major surge. We haven't had the final one yet. And so he's noting here, though, this is just an accumulation area. And when you get to the top, that's the distribution area, which means selling area. We're just not there yet. I suspect that is correct. I will not be surprised to see that. And he's been calling for double-digit price action, too. Here's a post from chart analyst CW. He's still optimistic. He posted this just yesterday. XRP will rise above its all-time high and head towards the phase 4 peak of $21.50. So he ain't shy about insisting this is what he thinks is most probable. And it's funny. I just noticed this guy. This guy thinks that's really funny, so I guess he thinks it's not gonna happen. I should probably add that to my future dunks bookmark tab. I might do that after the video, if I remember to. But I just again don't know where the market's gonna peak, but I do think we're gonna get that final burst. Here's a post from chart analyst Ali Martinez. XRP is trading inside a triangle and setting up for a 16% move. And he posted that last night. He also posted that, might have been 2 days ago. I'd have to go back and look, and I highlighted that on my channel. But he's now posted effectively the same thing twice, 2 days in a row. So he does believe this thing is likely going to break in the short term. So we could be getting a pop. And again, I know the market's down, at least at the time I'm recording this. I don't give it 5 seconds. Maybe it'll be different. Things happen fast in crypto. Here's a post from chart analyst Hubwaves. XRP says we're seeing some pretty solid moves of our lows across the board. Since our last XRP update, it's been a series of upside impulses on the micro and now testing our immediate resistance level. If it can break above $2.22 resistance, then it's likely going to carry into 240-ish, which means $2.40 plus. This will ultimately give us our clue as to where we are. Breakthrough 240 to 250-ish, we're likely in our wave 3 of the lows and carry to $2.85-ish. Keep an eye on those levels as we approach them. We want to see increased volume and strength in oscillators when we do. Okay, so at least at the time I'm recording this, the market is down a bit. As I keep highlighting, it's an FOMC day. This type of volatility, historically very normal. Nothing's weird. That's one thing you can always count on an FOMC day, even if you don't know directionally for sure where it's going to go, is that there's going to be something. And then you can argue about what direction and to what degree will the volatility be intense, but it's going to exist. And we did see that today, very obviously. Not a big deal, very normal, not indicative of which way we're going to go. It just is. Here's a post from chart analyst Tara. Simply wrote, XRP is bullish. The RSI is not showing a top yet. I'm expecting some short-term resistance soon at about $2.18 level. Let's assume that resistance will be when Bitcoin is at $94,200. Also expecting a backtest on the $2.18 level, ultimately turning it into support so that it can push to the $2.30 resistance level. Once these resistances break, I think it'll be clear to reach the next wave target at $2.73 for wave 3. Okay, so in the not too distant future, closer to $3 is what she's counting on. And cycle's not over. This is what I keep seeing from almost 100% of analysts that I follow. XRP, not only is it not dead, but it's going to surge higher. It's going to hit new all-time highs. Most think that it's going into double-digit price action and will melt faces. That is what I continue to see, despite the recent bearish tone over the last couple months or so. The analysts that I follow say no. And it's funny, it's actually 2 months to the day since we had that liquidation event. I don't feel any different. I do not believe we're in a bear market. I just don't. It's just volatility. Here's a post from chart analyst Greg Crypto. XRP says the macro structure remains fully intact. No monthly close below the yellow support box. No confirmed breakout above the what he calls the Bifrost bridge. You have to look on the screen to see what he's talking about. It's this particular range. And he says this channel will continue guiding XRP's long-term trajectory for years to come. We spent 13 plus months accumulating above $2. Small wicks and lower time frame noise do not change the big picture. Those are just liquidity games to shake out weak hands. And so he still firmly believes also that the best is yet ahead. We are not done here. And I'm firmly in that camp. That's what I think is most probable. I don't know for sure. Nobody knows for sure. But that's what makes the most logical sense. So I'm expecting a fantastic 2026. I was, like the rest of you, we were hoping, nobody knew for sure, but we were hoping we'd see that euphoric alt season. But it looks like at this point, Raoul Paul was just right. It really does. Because the debt refinancing, it's going to go into 2026, but nothing's broken here, so that's good. I certainly, I'm not horrendously disappointed by 2025, especially with that knowledge in my mind. I'm aware of why this is happening. In particular, because XRP just showed ridiculous strength compared to other coins. So I feel great as an XRP holder. XRP this year hitting multiple new all-time highs when we were told it was never going to happen. Well, that feels great. That's vindication. So 2025, it's more sideways price action than I think most of us would have wanted, but it's not the end of the world, honestly. It's great, and it's great for XRP holders. So I'm still feeling very good about this, frankly. I'm excited for 2026. And so, yes, now we know it is delayed. It looks like Raoul Paul almost certainly was correct, but he still does need to be, proven to be correct. That hasn't technically happened. We got to wait for 2026 to roll out, but I'm optimistic he will be. So let's see what happens. I feel like, even if we have to wait halfway through the year, you're gonna see. I mean, we're not, despite the recent pullback in crypto, especially with Bitcoin dropping recently to $80,000 from 126K. Look, if we're not going to have sooner than later a ridiculous, precipitous drop where Bitcoin goes to $40,000 or $50,000, which is what some of the bears are calling for, if that doesn't happen ASAP, come on, guys. You're just doom and gloom fudsters at that point. Come on. I really think the best is yet ahead. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.